The opinions expressed on the following audio program are solely those of the host and the guests. Burner Podcast is an independently produced, not-for-profit show and is not associated with the Burning Man organization or its subsidiaries. The views expressed are not representative of the entire Burning Man community and are presented here for entertainment purposes only. In short, calm the fuck down. It's just a podcast.
All right, it's episode number 91, and it is 295 days till the man burns as of this recording. I want to start out today's show by reading my favorite piece of listener mail from this past month from Erlen the Wizard. Erlen, hope you don't mind. Erlen said, listening to episode 89 now, and in the spirit of immediacy, just wanted to let you know that I love what you're doing! Exclamation point. A year ago, I really had little to no idea what Burning Man really was, but it seemed appealing, and I started looking into it. And one of the things that got me to actually commit to going was the inspiring people and stories presented on your show. Logistically, it was kind of a big thing since I live in Europe, but finally made the trip out solo, got with a camp from LA called Blazing Death Ship, and had just the best time of my life. Keep putting them out there. Much love from Norway, Erlen the Wizard. I'm making like giddy body language gestures, which you can't see, obviously, because this is an audio program. Erlen, we fucking love you, and we love your dedication and the journey and the energy that you put into our community. Maybe we can get you on someday to do a roundtable about what it's like to pack and prep for Burning Man from when you're coming from another country. And it's about time we had another Viking on the show, I think, as it's been a while since Otto von Danger graced us with his presence. By the way, it seems like Otto is still going strong. We had him on the show on episode 71. It was the extremely accurately titled Otto von Danger Refuses to Die. He's working on new projects and just like kicking ass. You should check out that episode. And then if you haven't listened to that one, definitely go back to it. It's one that comes up pretty often in conversations. Speaking of long, arduous journeys into the unknown, I just got back from Phoenix, Arizona, and had an absolute blast with the Waltrip tribe, among many other people that I hung out with out there. I mean, if you're in Arizona, it's kind of hard not to be affiliated with Walter, like somehow, from some distance. My lovely new Zony BFF, one Mr. Matt Meanders, was an amazing, gracious host and has just the most awesome energy in his home. Matt has been a listener for a while, and we didn't actually physically meet until I arrived at his home and treated it like a bed and breakfast. We attended Camp Walter's big annual party, known simply as The Event, and had an absolute blast. It was a really amazing party. Then the next, you're going to hear more about it, by the way. I'm not going to get too much into it. We'll be talking about it on today's chat. Then the next morning, we're up, and our friend Eric is in the kitchen, and we're like, oh, shit, Eric, you've been here the whole time. And he's like, yep. And that's the kind of home that Matt has. It was a lot of fun. So today's interview, which was recorded after we had sufficient time recuperating on Monday, 29th, I think, October 29th, after the big party. It's basically today's show is basically like a direct sequel to our first show of 2018. That was episode 73, entitled Peace, Love, and Walter. In that one, you got to hear the backstory of how this whole massive Camp Walter thing started with one humble Volkswagen fire rescue vehicle. And in that conversation with leads Kirk, Mary, and Ricky, we talked a bit about Walter's future plans, but the focus was generally more on like the history and culture. And then Ricky went off on some tangents. I love you, Ricky. On today's episode, Kirk and Mary return, and we also have with us Ryan McDermott, who runs Walter's nonprofit wing called The Hive. So we'll get into all these details and titles and who does what and what falls where. So now you've got the Camp Walter, and now you've got like the Walter Productions for-profit operation, and then now there's this like nonprofit. And wait, there's more. We get into Walter's 100-year plan. We also get into a wonderful chat about leadership and culture and tribe building. This is a very, very inspirational episode. It's pretty amazing all the stuff they're doing. There's also a topic I've been getting poked about a lot lately, that of decommodification, and it's something that's in a lot of people's minds right now. I guess it's another watershed moment in Burning Man culture history where more and more of us are really taking action on our desire to make a life of burning our full-time jobs. And how do you do that? Burners used to daydream and ponder, wouldn't it be nice if I could do this all year round? Well, we can. A lot of people are. And we, as a community, are in the middle of figuring out exactly how that works. How do we do that without diluting the culture too much? Listener Ellie Catherine, who recently asked me to opine on this topic. So this one's for you, Poop Bunny. We get into it about an hour or so into it, but I mean, really, a lot of the conversation is about really how to do it right. The Walter crew is pretty phenomenal. What they've been able to make happen from one humble lawn car is amazing. So anyway, I've yet to meet someone who doesn't like just completely gush over Kirk and Mary and the Walter tribe, and today's show should be basically another excuse to do more of that. And after the conversation, we will close this episode with a housey, dusty set by our very good friend Joe P, based out of San Diego. The set that you will hear after today's chat was recorded atop Calliope on Thursday night at Burning Man 2018 at Press Play, a Burner podcast soiree held at Burners Without Borders camp. This was the party you've heard me talk about a bunch of times, where like the entire sort of like Walter show showed up, and Calliope, of course, being a part of Walter. It's pretty magical. It means a lot to me to be able to play this set for you guys. So that's going to be after today's chat. It's pretty awesome. Today's show is basically like an interstate love fest between California and Arizona, San Diego and Phoenix. Got a San Diego DJ on top of an Arizona art car. We got me over there. It was really great. I had such a great time, and I'm looking forward to going back to Arizona way more often. Today's episode is entitled Just Be Nice. You'll know what that means when you listen. I go by Mr. Arashi, even though nobody calls me Mr. Welcome to Burner Podcast.
On the first part of the journey, I was looking at all the life. There were plants and birds and rocks and things. There was sand and hills and rain. The first thing I met was the fly with the balls and the sky with no clouds. The heat was hot and the ground was dry, but the air was full of sound. I've been through the desert on a horse with no name. It felt good to be out of the rain. In the desert, you can't remember your name, 'cause there ain't no one for to give you no name.
Sitting on a table like this, like the person on the other side would get really excited and start slamming on the table. I recently actually started like doing more with like actual mics where people are holding them, and I find like that ends up being distracting too.
Yeah.
So my ideal future will be we'll have like mics aimed at each one of your mouths.
Does this do you use all of, like, these are two mics, aren't they?
Yeah.
Does it use these two and that one at the same time?
Yes. Well, so this was the first mic that we ever got, because for some I thought bigger is better for some, and it's not. The size has
looks
nothing to
cool.
do with it. Yeah,
It looks like a talk show.
Right.
Like,
that was I think that was part of the selling process, and that records directly into the computer. But the quality, like we bought this guy for Burning Man, the test cam, and then it ended up being the one that just became the one that we keep using. For some reason, the sound quality is just like much better.
I've heard super good things about.
Yeah.
I think it's this exact recorder. There's a bunch of comedians I listen to and stuff that like they record their shows and they just stick one of those in the crowd and they say that it's like flawless.
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
Really good, so.
Yeah, no, it's really clean, and what you learn over the years is like the same thing that I tell people as a photographer, which is like they keep asking about what camera they should buy.
Yeah,
I'm
right.
like, don't worry about it. Just start shooting.
Yeah.
You know, that the camera's just a piece of equipment. And it's the same thing with this. Like, you start learning about acoustics, and like the room is more important. Getting people like a good distance away from the mic is more important.
Yeah.
All that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so this might be the first time that I'm like back with like the same people that were on in the same year. So, but you guys have had just like an insane year. A lot of the changes that are happening, because like the last time we recorded, you were telling us about the new space and the plans that you have for it. But it really just hit me like a ton of bricks what it was when we walked into that party on Saturday night. I mean, this is absolutely insane. Was that the first big event that you guys have had at the new warehouse space?
Yeah, that was absolutely our inaugural event. The night before, we had opened it up just for some industry folks and people that had helped us build it, and people from the art community. But Saturday night was the beginning of the warehouse. Yeah.
How do you feel?
I mean, that's a really, really cool venue. So, you know, that was actually, well, one of the things that was really cool that I was saying about the warehouse from my perspective was that, like, I was getting to see it because of what I've been doing with the Hive have been more, you know, in here in the Dome, and hadn't seen, like, as much of the build as I do on most of our other stuff. And so, like, getting to walk into that thing and see it, like, mostly just done and activated was really, really cool.
Yeah.
I thought it was an awesome space.
Yeah, and the place where we built all of the Walter Burning Man creations was the Walter Dome, which was an old, probably 1940s bow truss building. But the new warehouse is 6 of those. So it's twice as long, and it has 3 of the bow truss. So it just makes this, you know, enormous platform to be able to put a lot more interactive elements in. And that's what I noticed is that, you know, we had set it up so that people would wander around it, find new things. And, you know, there's probably at least a dozen different sort of areas you could hang out.
Right.
And people went everywhere. They just spilled out. And so it was music and art and, you know, interactive lasers and VR and chill spaces and all the things, you know, touched some person.
Yeah, no, it was pretty spectacular. And it was very much like in the spirit of, you know, the Burning Man energy, which is, you know, climb things, look at things, play with it, touch things. Like don't have this division of like velvet rope where you're allowed to stand on this side and the art is on this side.
Yeah.
There's a really cool thing that's like the physical properties of that space too, which is like most of the time we see these, you know, all the art cars, they're either they're always outdoors, or they're in, you know, the build space where we're working on them or something like that. But to see them all sort of on and activated in an enclosed space kind of like shifts the perspective a little bit on their scale. And so, like, I can't remember, I think somebody said a comment that was basically like, wow, Mona Lisa is huge. like they had like, because usually you see her and she's outside at Burning Man or something like that. You almost forget how big these things are until they're under a roof, you know. So
That's so funny. Like right after I was describing this velvet rope experience, you referenced the Mona Lisa, obviously not like the painting in France.
Oh,
like, but it's such a different. It's such a perfect, like, I don't know, analogy of like what that experience is like. Because here's this art space, and then there's the Mona Lisa art car. and I mean, it has like spikes on it. And I kind of used it to like poke a hole in my cup. So it was pretty funny. And at one point, Kirk, I was watching you showing her to somebody, and like you're saying, "No, it's okay, you can touch it." Like, and the complete opposite of the Mona Lisa in the Louvre, so,
Exactly.
which was really cool.
Yeah, you mentioned the cups. So one of our experiments for the event at the warehouse was to use reusable silicone cups, and that actually was something one of our campmates at Burning Man this year brought a big silicone cup to every person in our camp, and they're indestructible, and they're really cool little devices. So we thought we'd give it a shot, and it was, we didn't call it a Leave No Trace event, but there was no garbage.
Yeah.
Like zero. It was the weirdest post-party cleanup that I've ever been involved in.
Well, it's so funny because like it's become part of our thing. It's just like at the end of the show, like you're describing, like everybody goes and cleans up all the trash, and it's like fun and it's kind of silly. And so like towards the end of the thing, or towards the end of the event, I think Jules or somebody was passing out trash bags, and everybody's like excited because we're going to do this fun thing where we like all pick up the trash, and it's really fun. Then the music stops and the lights come on, and we're like, there's no trash to pick up. Like it was almost like a letdown. Like here we are standing with these bags, and now we're like
and the bags were the move.
Yeah, now we just have to like get rid of these bags, I guess,
Even the trash picking, like, because we're all adult children, obviously, who are attracted to this community, and like part of it is like, all right, pick up trash, like little kids running around picking up your toys and putting them away. So I was actually, it might have been on the last episode, we were talking to Widget and Conchita, and we were talking about how like the Leave No Trace aspect of our culture is like the ultimate PR tool. Because everywhere we go, it's just autopilot. Like we don't want like being around a bunch of crap on the ground. When I go to like a mainstream festival, that's the thing that I can't deal with anymore. It's just like constantly stepping on crap on the ground. And, oof.
Yep. Yeah. Boy, those cups. I mean, I was blown away by how much that affected the entirety of that, and it just was there wasn't sticky or anywhere. So I think half drink cups are probably the source of a lot of the ongoing sticky mess at the end of a party. Yeah, but it worked, and
it's like you're giving everyone a tiny piece of ownership over the event, so they have a vested interest in like finishing their drink and not leaving a half left thing over there.
There's that interesting thing too of like well, it's almost a game you play with people, or maybe I just say I play with people at Burning Man, is like once you put something in someone's cup, they basically have to drink it because there's nowhere to get rid of it. And so sometimes, like, if I'm toying with somebody, I might make them drink a pickleback. Or when I say make, that's a little bit aggressive. But it's like you have to drink the thing in your cup. And so whereas at a normal bar or something like that, what you're saying with these half-empty cups, you didn't have that at all because you needed to finish your drink in order to go get another one. Like you couldn't leave it anywhere because you wanted to keep your non-disposable cup.
Exactly.
That's cool.
Did you guys have I don't know, local leadership in attendance as far as public servants, VIP stuff like that? Yeah.
Former mayors and folks from the city of Phoenix were there. Certainly at the soft opening, and some of our state representatives I saw there on Saturday night. So one of the things that was said a bunch of times was just thank you for what you're doing for Phoenix, which was really wonderful to hear, and in part makes me think about what did we do these last 10 years, because this year at Burning Man was the flip of the page for the first 10 years of our 100-year plan.
Wow.
And so there's been a lot of reflection on what even happened in that first 10 years, as well as a very concrete way to think about 100 years. Now we know it's only 10 of those.
Wow.
So a lot of us have lived through that first decade now, and we're like, okay, well, I guess it's 10 of those. That's what 100 is. So we're really looking at that second 10 and trying to wrap our heads around what do we do and how do we evolve into that second 10. And one of them is to sink more roots into Phoenix, really.
I try to not lose sight personally. Like, that's the thing that just keeps me in awe constantly, is here is this thing that not too long ago, a lot of the people who were involved in the Burning Man community, Burning Man culture, attending Burning Man, had to kind of keep it a secret. Like, we have friends, I have many personal friends I can name who have been like directly targeted as having attended Burning Man, you know, being a partner at a law firm and then being fired from their job because photos of them popped up. And even like to this day, like there are still very much, you know, cultures, and like when you go to some of the more conservative parts of the country and the world, like they do want to see that as this is a thing they can target. And now here you guys are doing this very public thing, and it's making the city of Phoenix, you know, the leadership here looking at it and going, wow, like thank you for all the contribution you've done to the city.
Yeah.
And that's a really incredible thing. That's a massive, huge thing.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess we feel the embrace. There's a big public art exhibition in November where art is put along one of the canals in Scottsdale, and they almost never invite local artists, but they invited Walter to come and put our floating giant lotus flowers called Flotus that shoot 20, 30-foot flames out of them, and they'll be interactive with LED lights and a console and all that. And then we also got invited to build a 30-foot tall sculpture for the holidays downtown, which will be a tinsel tree of sorts, a copper tree that will be in downtown Phoenix. So we're feeling the love here for whatever reason, and it might be because we're nice. I don't know, but
they're pretty nice.
I think they like that we're doing things, like we're actively part of this art community in town, and I think that we're trying to be even a better platform for other artists and expand what we're describing as kind of our form of art.
Right.
To be immersive, interactive, experiential. It's performance, it's visual. And it's often a collaborative process where not everyone who's involved is a quote unquote artist. So
right.
Really, it's a broad definition of art and artful ways, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it almost seems like it's part of like a maturing artist's path. Like as you mature as a leader, as an artist, like you get more and more excited with the idea of creating the dance floor rather than simply being in the dance floor. Mm-hmm. And it's, I wonder, one quick question I had when you were describing that, by the way, why is it that they don't invite more local artists, do you think?
I think this thing called Canal Convergence is right in the heart of what I would call I don't know, it's a ritzy part of town. I guess that's one way to describe it. It's really nice, in fact. And there is enough money in that environment to be able to attract global artists. And so they've gotten some amazing artists to come and be part of that. And maybe now there's a recognition that some of that talent might be right under their noses.
Right.
And so it was a huge honor for us to get that invite. Yeah. But yeah, maybe Phoenix is starting to really pop.
Yeah. It's not. I think like that general challenge that a lot of local artists feel in every city I've been to, at least, is very common. It's kind of like you keep trying to show your parents your cool new magic trick, and like they don't care as much. You try to show somebody else. I feel like I definitely identify with that experience. In San Diego, a lot of musicians would have to leave in order to get recognition, and they come back. So being able to create that platform, I would imagine, for what Walter Productions is able to do, like that's a huge thing, that you're able to show them like, look how much exists here. Look how big we can make it. That's absolutely super, super powerful.
I think there's a cultural shift happening too that, or I wouldn't call it a cultural shift, maybe just a trend, but like local is really cool. You know what I mean? Like local is hip.
Yeah.
And so like, and I'm not saying that it's I don't mean to use trend as like a negative. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
You know, but like you're seeing that in all sorts of stuff, like farm to table, restaurants and everything. I think maybe you're just seeing some of that happen, excuse me, for art too, which is like, it's almost cooler to say, oh, all of this stuff is from local artists, you know? So
that is a trend I will not object to.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
It's a quote from Rumi that I butcher on every episode of this show is I think is when I was young and foolish, I tried to change the world. When I was old and wise, I tried to change myself. Mm-hmm. So you see like a movement in general in human culture in that where we're focusing more on our immediate surroundings because we're like, I can't control what the fuck's going on in DC right now. So what if I focus on my own community? And then that is reverberating more and more, and it's becoming a part of like culture, local culture as a whole.
Yeah, you know, in fact, we could even, there's like a recursiveness, I think, to the discussion about like what we're doing with Walter as a platform or the Hive is sort of the same, the benefit is the same as what maybe Scottsdale or the people doing this art festival are seeing, where like, if you essentially invest into your local community and say like, no, we're going to prop up these local artists, like your return is higher than if you just, if you bring somebody in from out of town. You know, you're building an art scene. If you've got money to fund art and you do it locally, you're building an art scene that you can then draw more artists from in the future. So, you know, if Canal Convergence grants a bunch of people money to build stuff, Canal Convergence succeeds more in the future.
Yeah. We always have a lot more power when we connect with our more surrounding community. Yeah. So we're talking about the 100-year plan. We're going to probably hit on a few different topics that we hit on the last time that we sat down. This time we have a Ryan instead of a Ricky. Last time was more about sort of like the story of how kind of Walter came together and became the tribe. And when Rebel and I were speaking about the previous episode, we knew from the beginning that this was going to be like a multi-part story that we're telling, because there's so much happening with Walter that we could start with sort of like that initial background story of how the family came together, and then we're going to get into more like production technical stuff. So for any listeners who want that prequel, go back to the last episode, which I probably mentioned that in the intro. So the 100-year plan, when did that come together and what is it?
Yeah, well, Mary and I started Walter not thinking about there being a 100-year plan by any means, and it came through the understanding that we were not on a sustainable path, and that if anything were to happen to Mary or I, potentially the whole thing could stop. And so in thinking about that, we started really deciding we needed to define some things about what is Walter, and that's where we came up with the show Be Nice and Clean Up Your Shit as a filter to our activities and to who we hang out with and all that, which clears up 95% of all problems right there with those first three. But then there are other things, and it's like, you know, dream big, but use what we have. There are a few others in there that maybe aren't quite as critical, but one of them is keep it going. And so the way you keep it going, in part, is by the structure of the organization. And Walter had been very heavy in community service very early on. And then over time, we developed a capability to go out and to be able to generate revenue by having our production capabilities at festivals and corporate events and things like that. And we realized that we actually needed to have a separation there. And we certainly always are watching what Burning Man does, and we've learned so much. And the conversion of Burning Man to a not-for-profit was certainly of great interest to us. And so what we did was we decided that at the beginning of 2018 we would carve out a portion of what we see as the mission of Walter, and it would become the Walter Hive, which is a 501c3 not-for-profit. And Mary took over the responsibility for the not-for-profit side, and Ryan here is working with her on that. And then I took on the responsibility for the for-profit side. And the party that you were at on Saturday night was that Walter Productions for-profit side, who has the space and manage the production and develop the programming with all of the artists. And so we realized that if we did that, we could not only do more, but we could really focus on service and on community, and we could really focus on sustainability through kind of dividing and conquering to some extent.
And so is Walter the camp fall under one of those, or is that like a whole separate entity on its own?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and it's the one that we are. It's the one that we're really actively looking at right now. So this, turning the page at this year's Burning Man, at the corner of 2 and Esplanade, which was the only other place that I ever wanted to camp at Burning Man. Having the corner of 10 and Esplanade for a couple of years was an amazing honor, and then the other corner to have been there just was amazing. And we sort of looked at it and we were like, well, we were an art car camp, and then we became a theme camp, and then we became a sound camp, and then we realized, well, the only kind of camp we actually haven't been is an art camp, like a playa art or a temple building camp, which I would love to build the temple in about 10 years.
Yeah.
But we
giant Volkswagen temple.
The first moving temple. It's going to be an aircraft carrier, and we're bringing it in on.
But we've never really built like the art piece that really I think was what was our inspiration, like seeing Big Jig Rig was the one of the really most inspirational sort of art pieces. And then we've always been drawn to the big art and the man and the temple and all that. But Walter's not really taken part in that. So I think that that's probably our next stage of evolution. And then where does that fall? It's certainly a not-profit event for us. So there's no question. Yeah. In the final years of the first 10, all of our traveling show and all of the production that we did, which was the revenue generating side, basically paid for us to do Burning Man.
Right.
So on the balance, that allowed us to not only have year-round production capabilities that could then allow us to take a dozen semis with the logistics and the crews and all of that required to be able to do what we've done over these past bigger years. But right now, I think we're really looking at it and saying, what is our next stage of evolution? And I think everything's on the table in terms of what we're going to do. We have our friends like Dwayne Flatmo, who had this amazing El Pulpo Mecanico, and next year he brings something completely different. And I kind of feel like we're going to do a phase change like that. And I think we're going to start focusing more on art, as maybe freestanding art, or who knows what kind of art that we'll create. But
that's interesting, because some of the things that you've been doing in the past 10 years are kind of transitioning more to the the Walter production side of things. So the energy of Walter Camp is going to be shifting and focusing more on art, is what you're describing.
Yeah.
That's
I mean, you could
interesting.
certainly say that every single bit of everything that we've done is art.
Right, yeah,
But-
absolutely.
But I think by definition, like my Burning Man definition of art, I don't know if it'll be more performance or more, freestanding, or, I don't know. It's be interesting to find out. One of the people that was at our event on Saturday night said that it was a multi-dimensional experience.
Yeah.
And it was because of that, that there's so many different places and so many different things and all this level of interactivity. And I don't know, maybe that's the direction that we're going. We're going into a multi-dimensional space.
Right. Yeah, and it's super interesting to just watching you guys like over the past year. There's such a sense of like community energy that exists around the tribe and the way that everybody sees the tribe and the connections that exist like within Burning Man, but also like the independent projects that we've been to. I mean, I partied with you guys on New Year's Eve, and that was like, this complete Burning Man in the middle of downtown Phoenix experience, but it was still like, it had that influence, but it still felt like, oh, that's right, we are in downtown Phoenix, like we're not like on Playa. So it was an interesting experience, and I'm trying to figure out how to articulate this. I feel like there's a general sense that maybe it's because of what you're describing earlier about how like you sit down and you set the intentions and you write out the rules or the principles for yourselves about how do we keep this going, for example. And you set those intentions and those kind of guide the way about where the build goes. And I imagine that's a primary energy behind like how positively people see the Walter tribe, and how even like there is this like for production side of it, and then there's like Burning Man, and there's like the nonprofit, and there's like all this other stuff that you're doing, and it all somehow still seamlessly meshes together, and it feels right. Is like the best way I can describe it. And I can't quite describe, what else it would be. And it's about intention, like setting right intentions and moving forward. So so like I said, the question is like for the 100-year plan part, can you break down what all the different sections of those are for the listeners? Because I saw that there was like Walter Yoga and
Yeah, well, currently where we're at is we're developing these roots in Phoenix. And so we're really looking at site-based installations. So we have the Walter Dome is the not-for-profit side of that, with the art gallery and the cooperative microbrewery and the makerspace, and now all of the Hive programming and all of that. But this is really, it's a venue. It's a really cool venue. And for years and years we've been throwing events here, and people love to come here. And so this is here. Then the Walter Station Brewery, which is an old fire station, and we're getting connected with all of our friends in the local fire departments and bring in fire equipment, and we've started to brew beer there. So we'll have that, and it's also an amazing garage band kind of place in the old engine bays where the fire trucks would go. Then
so it's I'm sorry,
Yeah.
clarify that one some more. So connecting with the fire stations, so it's building community with fire departments, but also it's a brewery.
Yeah, this is a very Walter
Okay.
community building methodology. So we were about Volkswagen buses, so we went to Volkswagen bus events and grew a community around Volkswagen buses.
Yeah.
Turned out some people like to brew beer. We started to grow a community of people who like to grow beer. We like to make things. We started to grow a fabricator and a group. We started to do more technical things with lighting and sound, and we started to develop larger community there. And then musicians and artists and visual and performance artists. And now we're in an old fire station, so obviously what would you do? You'd connect with all the fire departments. So
It's Burning Man shooting flames in the air. Let's make friends with the fire department.
absolutely. Well, we have
Cats and dogs living together.
It's a little bit, our very first not-for-profit that we really worked and continue to work with is the Arizona Burn Foundation. And so burn survivors, and Mary started working with that population well before Walter was even, a glint in anyone's eye. So we know a lot of the fire department folks. So now we actually just have a brand new platform
Yeah.
for their involvement.
That's perfect. Walter Yoga?
Yeah, so we have this very ecstatic sort of high energy side to Walter, so we knew that we needed some balance.
Yeah.
And so the balance is really more contemplative, more mindfulness based, more health and wellness, more sober, more all that good stuff.
Yeah.
And that's a balance for us, and we needed that sort of balance.
Yeah.
And let's see what else.
Yeah,
I guess the public art side is I think it's very difficult to do custom fabrication. We see a lot of work. Ryan's working on a project right now for a big brand. We're building this giant tree, for downtown Phoenix. So art will always be part of it. How much we endeavor to go that direction will be still to be seen. But so we have these venues, then we have our traveling show still, and then that probably rounds out most of what is Walter.
Yeah. Yoga. I mean, yoga is definitely an excellent move because I can just tell you I've been meditating for quite a few years, and one of the ways that I'm constantly trying to convince my friends to pick up meditation is I'm like, listen, the partying gets more fun. Trust me.
Yeah.
Get yourself in like good alignment and like recharge, and like it just you feel healthier. You're more focused, and you wake up every day feeling more energy.
Yeah.
There's a story I kind of want to interject here that's a little bit related as you're talking about like how, there's all these facets to Walter and how it's growing and stuff like that. That I think is related, correct me if I'm wrong, about some of the strategy, or at least what I seem to see as the strategy. And that was like, so my now wife, Allison, is also part of the Hive and also one of the co-leads with us for the camp. And we got engaged. We got married this year at Burning Man, which was awesome. And we got engaged the year before that during the eclipse. And going up to the burn that year, I had all these like plans about how like I wanted to get married during the eclipse. I wanted it was going to be like pre-Burning Man, because the eclipse happened, before the event started. It was actually like the Sunday or Monday that work week started. It was when the eclipse was. All of our best friends were going to be there. It was this like thing I had in my head, and I was going to do it. But we got up to the ranch, Midian, the night
Right
before.
next to Fly.
Yep, and we were sitting around the campfire, and it was sounding like everybody was kind of like, well, maybe we've been drinking a couple too many beers. Like, instead of getting up at sunrise tomorrow morning and heading out to Playa, we're going to stay here and watch the eclipse from Midian Ranch. And this like threw a wrench in all of these crazy plans that I had to propose to Allison. And so I pulled you aside, scared Allison half to death because we just disappeared from this party up in the middle of nowhere in northern Nevada. She couldn't find us. But I pulled you aside, and I was like, Kirk, so I'm going to propose to Allison tomorrow. And he's like, yeah. And he's like, I said, I really want to do it out on Playa during the eclipse. And you were like, your response was sort of, Ryan, if that's what you want to do, like, we will get in the car tomorrow morning, the four of us, and we'll go out to Playa and you'll do that and it'll be exactly what you want. But like my advice to you, which I thought was fantastic advice, was like, all your friends are here, your intentions are set. We don't try and force something into being exactly what you've imagined it as in your head. Set up the intentions, get all your friends together, and then sort of allow it to happen. And that's what I did. And so the next day, instead of us like going out to Playa hungover, or only half of us getting out there or whatever, so that I could have this event that I had imagined in my head as being the perfect engagement thing under the eclipse at Burning Man or whatever, we got engaged like behind a semi, like next to the crane because it wasn't as loud there, the generator wasn't running or so, who knows. But it was like the most perfect, most memorable, perfect thing. And the lesson from it was that, which was like, you can have these ideas in your head about how to make this thing be perfect. But if you try and force the world into being exactly the way that you imagined it, number one, it never will be. And so you're going to be disappointed. and you're just going to create this like tension. So set your intentions, get the people together, and then sort of let it unfold.
That's
it was
so
perfect. And I
completely
think
what I'm
that's-
experiencing. That's incredible.
Yeah.
That is such a great story. And it's like just so complete. I'm sorry, I got excited because it's like that's so what I'm experiencing right now in this chapter of my life.
Yeah,
and
right.
like literally, you're using words right now that I'm journaling about. Like, what can you describe a little bit about? Is that always been the thought process? Where did this thinking come from? Because obviously, it is so much behind like everything that we're experiencing with Walter.
Yeah, I mean, I can try, but Burning Man teaches you to not count on your plans.
Yeah.
I mean, that is for sure. Mindfulness teaches you how to be present where it's, where everything happens and all the opportunities are and every choice is. And then Mary just sort of taught me the rest, pretty much.
Is there some law of attraction stuff in discussion here, or is that just what I'm hearing in my head?
Law of attraction?
She's shrugging. Listeners who can't hear her. Because a lot of law of attraction basically says, you kind of like set your intentions in a specific direction, but let go of that very specificity. Basically, the advice you gave, Brian, was basically that. Don't be too deeply attached to this very exact thing. Try to force it, and let it unfold.
Yeah, yeah. I was not a mindful person when I was younger, and then once you meet somebody who is very mindful and very present, it's going to change your life.
If you're ready to hear it, because the other thing that happens is that if you're not ready, you end up digging your heels in more, and you guys butt heads even further.
That happens.
Yeah, but I just succumbed to it. I mean, I went for it.
It's really interesting because like the energy that you two bring with you, the energy that you navigate this reality with naturally, infused into the energy of like the Walter tribe. And like that's kind of a lot of what leadership is about, is finding like setting out that energetic kind of direction and allowing people to kind of dance in it naturally, rather than like demanding control and forcing things to happen and I'm going to fire you if you don't do exactly what I'm telling you to do. Which is maybe I imagine, again, kind of like what I was describing earlier about how it seems to be very natural here and how the energy of this tribe that exists here.
Yeah. Well, I think Mary hasn't said a word yet, so I'm trying to something I can do to draw her into the conversation. But an interesting one of late, which I'd be interested to hear her thoughts, is the whole thing about being nice, and so I think you might have gotten that tattoo since we were. So Mary tattooed in giant letters "Just be nice" on her arm, and
she's wearing a bracelet right now.
Yeah.
It says "Just be nice." Oh, there's that.
Absolutely. And so we've been having this whole thing about what is it to be nice, because it's one of our core principles, and like what is that? And there were plenty of opportunities where there were concerns about getting taken advantage of and getting walked on, and but Mary certainly knows exactly what she means by "just be nice," and it's not the typical definition. What does that mean to you, Mary?
No, well, it's not. You don't always have to be nicey nice. Like, it's be nice, but be strong.
Yeah.
But yes.
I thought it was sort of "be nice or else," and then she corrected me a little bit, but it
that's
kind
a
of
little
is in
strong.
certain situations.
Yeah.
Speak softly and carry a big stick.
Mm-hmm.
Well, everyone knows you don't fuck with Mary.
That might be the name of this episode. Don't fuck with Mary.
There's actually an "or" between those first three rules, so it's like show up, just be nice, or pick up all your things
And leave.
And leave. Yeah.
The I feel like I was talking to somebody about this right before the interview. Actually, is we're using different words to kind of describe a lot of similar concepts. We're actually having a conversation about that, how long it takes to use words.
Oh yeah, in the video earlier.
Yeah, but the concept is kind of like what we're getting at here, which is, I don't know. I found that like the ultimate symptom or characteristic of confidence is vulnerability. You know, like the lion is not as scared to show you his jugular, because what are you going to do to the lion? You know, and like, and I think I have definitely experienced in my journey that the more confident I became in my surroundings and in my body, the more comfortable I was being nice and giving. Because I'm not worried that you're going to take something from me. You know, and I think it is a symptom of confidence. Like that, when you say just be nice, like that's what I'm reading in that experience.
Yeah. There's a little nugget of like I don't know if this is officially part of the like training for the Black Rock Ranger training or not, but it's a story that's told in some of the trainings that I've been to, which is basically like a lot of times when you encounter somebody and they're being like really mean, or they're screaming at somebody or something like that, the reason why is because like they don't feel like they're heard anywhere else in their life, you know? So if you're somebody that like doesn't have a lot of power, as soon as you get a little bit of power, which is like you feel like you're in the right to go scream at your neighbor or something like that, those people will like super take advantage of it.
Yeah.
And so I think that's where this idea that you're describing of like, you know, confidence comes from security, or you're not mean if you're secure in your things. You don't feel like you need to have to yell at somebody because you feel like you have power in your life.
Absolutely.
So
yeah.
But I love that little piece of advice. I don't know, I got that years ago, and I've just seen that so many places of like somebody's being mean to you. Like, well, why? Maybe because they feel like this is their only opportunity to be loud or something.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's the you know, meet them with love approach. Like, and I think like that's where the misunderstanding comes from I don't know, people that look at our friends in our community and say, you know, it's a bunch of tree hugging hippies, you know, like loving people is not going to save your life. I'm like, no, meeting with love doesn't mean be a pushover, but you know, it means compassion and confidence is like, oh, like you poor little thing. You're like a little kid beating your chest and throwing leaves, you know.
Yeah.
And that's infused into your culture here. That's one of the things. Like I know, like in a lot of Burning Man, like there's quite a bit of snark. I don't hear a whole lot of it around the wall. I mean, I'm sure there is. I haven't heard a lot of it when I hang out with the Walter crew.
No, there's appropriate snark, I think, you know. Like, but for the most part, I think most people here are really just sweethearts.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
appropriate snark. You know?
Yeah, I do think that there's one thing that we've always tried to really work on, which is when someone isn't present, how you talk about them.
Right.
And there are exceptions where it's A-okay, and there's a lot of situations where it's not. And that's in some ways related to snark in a way, I think, because in snark often it's okay if you're joking.
Yeah.
But are you really joking?
Right.
Yeah. You know, are you really joking about that person? I think that we tease each other face to face mercilessly.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of that, and that is a kind of snark that I think we have lots of space for. But then there's the variance where we might put a kibosh on it.
Hey, roasting's fun. I'm going to go back to the Hive a bit. So can we describe more about sort of like what the Hive's mission is, what kind of projects the Hive is working on?
Yeah, the Hive, like Kirk said, is our nonprofit arm. And our mission is basically empowerment using or allowing people to express themselves through art and technology. So there's sort of, we have a lot of community partners now. We only started doing workshops in April. But we've partnered with, and Ryan, you can add to this, but the Foundation for Blind Children, Cancer Support Community, Boys and Girls Club, Mulligan's Manor.
St. Vincent de Paul.
Yeah.
Hospice.
Hospice of the
yeah.
Valley. Yeah. And we're continuing to grow our community partners. And then there's sort of another side that is open more just to the community in general. And that's Ryan is the program director. So he has been doing a lot of, we call them workshops, but they're more open, more like an open shop where he's been teaching people, he and Allison have been teaching people to weld and use the laser cutter and some of the tools we have here. And the other workshops with our partners, some of them are more specific, like with Hospice of the Valley, we worked with the staff of volunteers and doing a more sort of expressive therapeutic sort of workshop. And a lot of the others are a combination of sort of more fine art projects, and then the technology side too, where it's, like I said, the welding and the woodworking, the laser cutter programming.
Right. Can you like break down an example, like let's say like with the Boys and Girls Club, like how you partnered with them and
Yeah,
you guys
Ryan,
did?
do you want to talk about the design series?
Sure. So, well, I don't know how much of the history I should give to this, but so there's a group that Allison and I sort of borrowed this idea from called Nuvu out of Cambridge, and it's basically we sort of took a model that we go and teach with that group, and we modified it to sort of fit with what we're doing at the Hive. So what we do is a week long. We call it our design series. The first day, we bring all the kids in, and we just like try and get their hands on as many of these tools as we can. So like we teach them how to weld. Well, I always have to give the caveat of like teaching somebody to do any of these things is a lifelong pursuit. I don't mean any offense to welders to say like we teach a kid to weld in 5 minutes. But we teach them to weld. We teach them to do a woodworking project. We teach them to use the laser cutter, and we teach them to program an Arduino microcontroller. So it's usually some lighting project or something that they'll do. That's day one. Day two, we do a brainstorming session. So we sit them all down, and the goal of this workshop is usually to build some sort of interactive art installation. So my wife Allison and I have done a bunch of interactive art installations and have felt the sort of empowering part of that, and it's something that we want to share with the kids. So we have them build interactive art. We brainstorm with them. The exercise is essentially, hey, imagine you're walking down the sidewalk and you see something, and it just like makes you smile or like makes your day. What could that thing be? Well, let's build it. And so the kids come up with various ideas of what they would like that to be. Sometimes it's like something that plays music, or it's maybe some like very affirmational big sign thing or something like that. We then like kind of let the kids congeal around those ideas into groups. And then day 3 and 4, which is Wednesday and Thursday, it's an open shop. So it's just chaos, the lasers are running and the welders are running and everything's just running and the kids are just building stuff. That's Wednesday and Thursday. And then on Friday, I think we mentioned we have an art gallery on the sort of, campus is the wrong word, but on the property where the dome is. There's an art gallery. So the kids exhibit their creations in our art gallery, and we invite as many of our friends to come in and sort of cheer them on and make them feel big. And then that's it. That's the design series.
That's awesome.
And then they take the art piece back to their space.
Yeah.
So other kids and other people, and
Yeah.
that's another empowerment part of it, that they get to have other people, even like at the Boys and Girls Club, they took it back to their teen center so
Yeah.
that other kids that come there, other young adults, whatever, can see what they've done and they can feel proud.
Yeah, there's this thing that I really like, this idea that's like, when you make something, like when you create something and you put it in the world, like you're very literally changing the world around you.
Yeah.
And so some of these kids that we have worked with and that we'd like to work with are like, having a really tough time, and like they might not feel really very powerful, and so like to take these kids and be like, hey, like make something and put it in the world, and like the world's different now because you did that, like you can change it, you just it's not that hard,
Right.
is a super powerful thing for those kids. to feel like the world is now different because of something that they did. Well, like, all right, what else could I do to change something? And some of these kids really need that. So.
Yeah.
I like that the kids from some of them from the Foundation for the Blind said nobody gives us hammers.
Yeah.
This were blind kids that went through the design series.
Well, it wasn't the design
a
series. It was a
one-day
different
workshop.
workshop. Yeah, but they were all like,
Yeah.
there was a bunch of kids in here. In fact, it was just like a complete cacophony. There was like 10 or 20 kids. It was a lot of kids, all just like banging hammers because we were doing string art. So they had to pound like 50 nails into a board in order to tie the string around it. And well, that's another thing that we talk about in the Hive a lot is like making the kids do it. Like it's actually not that scary to pick up a welder. As long as you have a mask on and you have gloves and stuff, it's not that scary. And I don't mean to say it like this, but it almost feels sometimes like people, when they talk about these skills, they almost want it to sound scary.
Yes.
Like, oh, well, welding is really hard and, you're going to have to take a long time to learn how to do it. Yeah, sure. You shouldn't be welding bridges together if you spent 5 minutes with me in the Hive learning how to weld. But, like, it's actually not that hard. So pick up a welder, kid. Come over here and, like, we'll show you how to do it.
Some people have spent a lifetime developing an identity. Like, let's say, for example, if you're a welder.
Yeah. I don't mean to pick on welders. Sorry,
I
welders, I love you.
I'll pick on somebody else. I'll pick on photographers, for example. Like, video production. I can pick on photographers. I'm a photographer.
Yeah.
Like, you'll get that where like, oh, no, you got to do this thing and hold it. You look at some of these like YouTube videos, like trying to give tutorials to people. And they're like going out of their way to complicate the living shit out of this thing and saying, oh, if you can't do this thing, don't even pick up the camera. Like they're trying to make it a big deal because they've spent an entire life making it a lot more complicated for themselves, and they have a lot of ego attached to that thing.
Yeah.
And that's definitely something that I've observed over the years with like the artists that I aspire to be more like. You sort of have like the mid-level professional, I don't know, contractors or independent workers, whatever. It could be artists or it could be any kind of job. They're the ones who kind of like there's a bigger thing in that culture that exists a little bit of trying to make it seem like it's really hard and not everybody's allowed in.
Yeah.
And then you get to the people that really do move culture forward, the real leaders in each of these industries, and they're usually the ones that are saying anybody can do it. Trust me, anybody can do it. I always laugh at like David LaChapelle is the example that I've used a lot. Where he's a famous photographer, for listeners who aren't aware. Like he creates these insane, massive setups with colors and like lots of assistants are putting these things together. Like these are massive projects. And there's like this video of his where he's like hilariously not technical. And he's like yelling at his assistants, like, "Get me the purple thing." And like, this is like, what is the purple thing? Like, what are you saying? So like, but again, like you get to a lot of these guys that are at that level, and they'll say, anybody can do it. You can do it. And that's a lot of what Burning Man is about. Like it says, you can do it. Sure, pick up the hammer.
It's like Trey Ratcliffe, who camps with us,
Yeah.
and he, takes people out on walks
Yeah.
all over the world, teaching them, go ahead, get in here.
Yeah.
I love it.
He's. I was chatting with him recently, by the way. He said to hug you too.
Aw.
And he's for listeners who might not be familiar, Trey's. I think it's probably safe to say the most famous Burning Man photographer.
He's one of my favorite Burning
Yeah,
Man
he's
photographers.
insane.
His pictures are incredible.
Oh, it's just absolutely insane. And yeah, again, you look at his work and it's just like mind bending.
It's amazing. Yeah.
And yeah, and then again, the way he converses with his viewers and fan base and stuff, it's very much like, yeah, you can do it. Here, try this thing.
And through that, millions of people follow him and watch everything he does.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Goes back to just be nice.
Yeah. Yes.
No matter where you are or what level you think you're at, you can still be nice.
Yeah.
How do you guys? So now I'm just like, my brain is just kind of bending a little bit with logistics now. Like, do you have like a different meeting for the Hive, and then like the next day there's a different meeting for Walter Productions, and then the next day, or are they like all on the same day? Are there a bunch of different project things happening on different computers? Like literally, how do you keep track of everything you guys are doing?
So it's so
Kirk and Mary
there's
just stared at each other a
Very-
lot, by the
so
way.
so we
randomly.
have a Mary and I have a CEO that we share. So her name's Jennifer Erickson, and she has the task of kind of keeping us on track, and has been part of the restructuring to create the 501c3 and the for-profit entities, and that's kind of where the structure starts. And then Mary has an executive director, and I have a host of managers that are able to execute on all of our projects. So there's significant independence of the for-profit and the not-for-profit when it comes to the nuts and bolts of what they do on a daily basis. But this central infrastructure that Jennifer leads takes care of payroll, takes care of insurance, takes care of legal, takes care of accounting, takes care of finance, takes care of banking, takes care of really marketing. So we have shared resources, but when it gets to that very next level, it's a lot of independent teams that are working on independent projects.
Right. Wow. About how big-ish is the staff?
Yeah, if we combine everything, so that there are circles. So we're into the 20. I don't know if it's 20 to 25 when you talk about people that are employees. If you take Hive and Walter Productions together. Outside of that, there is a group of independent contractors or people who just come in for events that I'd say is getting into 150-ish, probably. If we just, who do we ever tap into? Some of those are folks with their own businesses or, full-time gigs that are just coming in for various things. And then outside of that are people that are contributors, in some way, and I don't even know how big that one is, because contributors are also a lot of the people that were at that party too. They're supporters. They may come in for something. We're really trying to have on the Walter Production side. If you're involved in an event that's a production event, we're getting paid and you're getting paid. On the Hive side it's much more a volunteer organization.
Okay.
And we had that all mixed in together
Right.
before. And Burning Man, quite honestly, does that to you, especially when you have 250 people in your camp and they're all volunteering their time. And then later we're out at a festival. It's muddying the waters a bit to not have some break, and some structure around that.
Yeah, no. What you're describing is such an excellent opportunity to describe like sort of the commodification, decommodification stuff, because like in a lot of as you were doing that description, what it kept making me think about is like a lot of like event like music label type stuff. I don't want to name any specifics out there, but like festivals that start with lots of like volunteers and like they have like the best of intentions and then they become this like massive corporate thing, but then there still would not be happening if it wasn't for tons of volunteers. So a lot of times like people start to ask the question like, wait a minute, like there's all these people that aren't getting paid, but you guys are like this major massive like corporate entity now. Like there's you're making enough money to be able to pay people, but somehow you're not. And you're right, there's like this kind of like, I feel like right now, like you see a lot of different entities like this still going through that gray area. And I guess the difference between how you guys are approaching it and how some of these other entities have is that you kind of looked at your 100-year plan ahead of time and started to look at things like this and say, how do we lay it out? How do we plan this thing? How do we split it up so that we don't muddy the waters?
Yeah.
A lot of times I think people start to, like a lot of these entities that I was describing, like some dance music label that ends up becoming some festival, I think like they're just doing like, it's just passion, like I'm gonna make this thing happen. And then when they become big, all of a sudden they're looking back and saying, oh shit, we didn't plan for this. What do we do right now? Whereas like I guess like you guys were kind of had the foresight to look at these things ahead of time and figure out how do you split it up. Does this fall under productions? This falls under the nonprofit.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're always working on it. It's a forever evolving thing. It's a very organic method,
Mhm.
but we do try to look ahead enough to know where the next step is. Like an example is for the what used to be probably a volunteer, now we can have a more work exchange.
Mhm.
So what is it that we have of value that is what will benefit that person, and usually it's like attendance at something,
Right.
So the volunteer side is just pure volunteer, but there is an exchange, which we've been talking a lot about commodification and decommodification, and the that is one of the things in the early years of Walter. We would not exchange money in any situation ever, and it never quite matched with our experience around Burning Man, because we know a lot of people paid a lot of money, and there was a lot of money exchanged in order for that event to occur.
Right.
But we didn't know how to even deal with that, and I don't think we understood what commodification meant in terms of, an interchangeable service or product that is basically indistinguishable from another. But we have, I think, worked very hard that there isn't anything like Walter, and so our definition currently of decommodification is what's the substitute for us.
Right.
If there is no substitute for us, we're still decommodified. And the exchange of money and resources, I think it changed for me when I heard Larry Harvey in an interview talk about the art market that was being created around the Burning Man event, and that that was a platform, and there were people who were now making money with their art that never would have had it not been for their involvement in Burning Man.
Right.
I took that as the nod to try to figure it out for Walter. And so some of the ways that we have done that over the years is we've checked in with Burning Man. We've checked in, before we put the Walter Productions website up, we sent it to Burning Man and said, hey, take a look at this. They made modifications, suggestions. We have never talked about Camp Walter anywhere but at Burning Man.
Yeah.
It just doesn't exist anywhere but there.
Are you in a position, by giving an example by any chance, of like what they suggested or recommended as a change?
Yeah, there was an image that was so clearly Burning Man. You couldn't see the man, you couldn't see the temple, but it was so clearly. And they said, why don't you take that one out and put a different one in? It wasn't that every image of Burning Man was a problem, but they got their opportunity to suggest a few things to us. And I think they suggested a few things in our text. I don't recall what all of those were, but we made those changes.
Right.
We've talked with them off and on throughout the years. We've gone to at Burning Man. There's a lunch that takes place where it's a lot of festival promoters that are there. We got to go in and talk about what we're doing. Told them what we're trying to do it the right way, and received some positive feedback, from Marion and others there. So there's no way to know for sure you're doing it right. We're just trying to be as authentic as possible and not use Burning Man as our crutch.
Right.
We're our own thing, and we do things that you'll never see at Burning Man.
Yeah. It's definitely it's an ongoing topic, and that's something that's been coming up more and more recently. I've had listeners reach out and say, "Can you do an episode on decommodification, for example?" And it's a fascinating time because, I come from a background in marketing. There is absolutely brands on Playa now. It's just they only exist on Playa, sort of. But now we have the internet technology and there's events happening, so these brands exist in the outside world as well. So then that's a whole conversation right there. Why is it that when this person does it, somehow it doesn't quite feel right, and then when this other guy does it, it feels okay. And I think perhaps maybe intentions are a major part of it. How much effort goes into it, how much reaching out. I think I've heard of situations, for example, where people have been going through things that like very mildly could be similar to what you were describing, but they didn't make the effort to reach out and ask the community, hey, how do you feel about this? You know, like there was recently a Instagram post. I won't say who it is, but it was a DJ group, and they basically, the ad was like very clearly a commercial for a product that they were pushing, and it was all at Burning Man. So it was pretty funny. I mean, like a few people called it out, and they're like, it's fine if you like this product, but you kind of made it look like it's just supposed to be an Instagram post, and then you tricked the viewer into a commercial.
Yeah.
And that just like kind of grosses people out. You know, it kind of makes me feel a little bit like, as a photographer, I'm 6'4". I used to try to be a fly on the wall, which is literally impossible when you're my size. Like, who is this giant brown person trying to hide with their camera? But then I found that when I just full on got right in people's faces and didn't give a shit, like the consent nod would come easily.
Yeah.
People don't like it when they feel like you're trying to pull a fast one on them.
Yeah.
And
There's an analogy that, excuse me, my wife and I use a lot, Allison, when we're talking about, I think, this topic, which is like, it's very apt because it's Halloween on Thursday.
Yeah.
I think Thursday.
Wednesday.
Wednesday. But it's like, there's two types of people. If you leave a bowl of candy on your front step and you're not home, some people might come up to the bowl of candy and they might be like, hoo boy, like, I'm going to take as much candy as I can. Yeah. But then there's other people that would approach it and be like, oh, cool. And like, you're polite about it. You know what I mean? And so when we've talked, Allison and I, about like decommodification or like how do these things interface, it's like the question I think is like, is somebody trying to take more than they were given? Or like, are they trying to elevate people by what they're doing? No, you're not elevating somebody by taking candy. That's where the analogy falls apart a little bit. But does it feel like this person's found a bowl of candy that they can take more than they were supposed to out of? Yeah. And I think that's kind of where it starts to feel gross.
That's
to us,
excellent.
You know,
it's literally the best example of it I've heard. I'm going to reference that multiple times in future episodes. That's absolutely perfect. Yeah. Are you giving more than you're taking?
Yeah.
Or are you taking more? And that's spot on. I think that's
awesome. And I mean, I think that like for us, like whenever we've talked about the things that we're doing, when Walter first started doing commercial stuff, we weren't as involved in, the camp and stuff as we are now. And so we had these discussions with ourselves where we're like, oh, what's going on? And the answer that we came to was like, no, I really do think that like when we go and do these commercial events, it is about elevating people. And it is about like, we go out and do one of these things and we're just trying to be like, hey, come over here and climb on top of Calliope because it's really, really cool. There's never been a sense of like trying to pull a fast one on somebody to get them to feel like there's some special thing that they get to have, but it's gated behind something. It's always just been about sharing and elevating people.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely spot on, I think. And that's definitely an experience that I've had in any situation where I've like, hopped into one of the cars or something, whoever the driver is like, just excited to have you there and like super nice. Come on in, guys. Yeah, climb on. Like there's like never any hesitation. And then there's like, certain camps who, are like the opposite. Like there was the camp that we were camped next to a couple of years ago where like the art car was almost like their own private little VIP section.
Yeah.
They like, only their camp went on it and then they like switched the button where it elevated above the playa even further. So it was the funniest thing. And like, I was like, oh, a lot of times I think though, people aren't thinking far enough ahead. I think generally people have good intentions and they just fuck it up in their own heads because, maybe they, grew up in a household where it was taught to them no, you should take all the candy because the others would if they had the chance.
Yeah.
Barry also the other day just said something about like leave your ego at the door was I don't remember the exact situation, but when I think back about any issues we've had in the past or where we've really needed to give feedback or where it didn't work out, with someone, it's common that it had become about them instead of it being about Walter.
Yeah.
And because Walter was an old fire truck that was there to help save lives. And that's like our inspiration, is just like, you know, it's like, who owns that fire truck? You know, it's like, I mean, well, everybody owns it. It's you know, it's part of community property. And he wasn't doing it to, you know, get his, you know, his kudos. He was doing it because that's what his job was. And I think that I think there's an interesting kind of relationship with ego in Walter, and it somehow we're as a group often able to transcend to, it's really not about any one of us. This is about all of us, and it's the people that we're interacting with, and I think that works. I think for us anyway.
No, it does massively. I've always felt, you know, if you feel like you need to micromanage every movement of your team, you've hired the wrong team. You know, it's kind of rotted at the core. And I think, again, like that's what we keep seeing, is like the energy that exists in the sort of like the community and the leadership of this extended family that is Walter. I mean, even people that aren't necessarily like directly, you know, working with you guys, like you keep attracting the right kind of energy, and most of the answers kind of seem to find themselves. And the more you set the right intentions, and you're kind of say, all right, there's the North Star, let's just go in that direction, and you know, the right people follow along. So the next 10 years are unfolding. The Hive is now a reality. We kind of teased about it a little bit on the last episode, but now it's here. How do you feel? Is there any thoughts you had since the last time we spoke about where this is all going that maybe have surprised you? Have there been new revelations to you just on a personal level during this chapter of the experience? Are there things that have happened that you absolutely did not expect? Or is it all playing out? Yeah. Is it all playing out exactly the way you planned?
No, I mean, we had mentioned the Hive in the last podcast, but it's now a reality. And for me, like a couple years ago, I had no idea that it would happen. I mean, it's sort of, the things that we're doing are kind of a dream that I've always had of something that I would want to do, but for it to become a reality and for it to take off like it has, and have, you know, we have Ryan and Allison are really the only staff besides the executive director, and we've had volunteers just jump in, and it's amazing. That's my big thing.
Yeah. I think from my perspective, I can never predict the future. Like, a lot has happened that I didn't see coming. And, you know, I think, did we have the warehouse? I don't know. I don't even know if we had the warehouse the last time we talked.
We were talking about the big house, but.
We were talking about the big house, yeah.
House.
Well, we put the big house on hold.
Right.
Yeah, and we did that because I didn't see tariffs. I didn't see that was going to happen.
I'm sorry, just to remind listeners real quick, what was the big house?
Yeah, so in downtown Phoenix,
house.
We have for a number of years been designing a gigantic house that is a 4-to-1 scale. So 4 houses wide, 4 houses deep, and 4 houses tall of a small, like a bungalow. But it was like a 40,000 square foot event facility that we got very, very, very far down the road on. And then construction costs, since we last talked, skyrocketed. And the market itself is just intense. And so I was concerned that we would build this gigantic event space. We'd be up to our ears in debt. And then the inevitable downturn of the economy would hit us right as we're trying to make it work.
Wow.
So what we've done is deconstructed that idea. Many of the elements are actually now in the gallery, the warehouse gallery that you were at on Saturday night, and we're opening our first bar in that space. the brewery, opening, as a support to that. So I would have thought the last time we talked that we would have been breaking ground and construction on the big house. So the warehouse has really grown out of that thing, and often, like with the Walter story where he blew his engine and we ended up with Heathen and Big Red, the taking down of the big house for a short time probably has really pushed us forward. And now we're in this, unbelievable, beautiful building and have lots more capabilities there than we would have had by being for a couple of years in big construction without doing a lot of other stuff. The other is I think it forced us to rethink our methodology for how we're going to build that house. And I'd like to build it for half the cost or less. And I think that I figured out that way, and maybe even a quarter of the cost.
Wow.
And it's sort of back to the thing about the kids and them getting to see their power through doing something. People tell you can't weld or you can't program or you can't use a circular saw or whatever it happens to be. In the process of designing the big house, everybody told us that we couldn't build it. We can't build this. We're not, we don't have the licenses and the credentials to be able to build this steel structure and do all the HVAC. And so by sort of the tariffs taking that out of the realm of possibility, it made me rethink our methods in doing it. And I think I found a DIY way to make this house. And so we'll see. I'm sure there will be adventures related to that, but I think we can build it. I think, and that would be way more Walter if we built it than someone handing us the keys to something that they built and called it Walter. That doesn't sound like us at all, honestly.
Dream big, work with what you have.
That's exactly right. And we have cranes.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, I did get to see the warehouse space a little bit last time. Got to see a couple of warehouse spaces.
Yeah, we have the 17th Avenue in Roosevelt, the old National Guard Armory. We have 7th Avenue and Roosevelt, which is interesting. We got the place in 7th Avenue and Roosevelt because we were trying to move to Tempe and that fell apart. And so the 7th Avenue and Roosevelt place, which was the old film studio and where we're going to build the big house, people told us was way too far out of the arts district. They said nobody's going to go there. Now, probably the hippest sort of where the artists all hang out is Kitty Corner, and there's a bar sort of right there. The music scene has moved down into the very close to where we're at now. Another area has popped up as a new arts area, and all that happened just in a few years. So we moved to 17th Avenue in Roosevelt, which is in a very sort of more distant area, and now it's popping up. It's full of artists, one of the main buildings, and there's artists moving into the area. So we went across the railroad tracks to the place you saw over the weekend. And that one is, it's going to take a little while for them to get to us there, but we're going to have a blast while they do.
Yeah. No, it's a gorgeous space. The art gallery space is amazing. Art cars are there. It's phenomenal. It's a phenomenal experience. I wonder, speaking of dreaming big, do you have any ideas and thoughts of things that you have been kicking around possibly doing that are not necessarily stamped down and written down yet, but that you could tease the listeners with potentially? Kirk and Mary are doing the hand gesture you first.
You always have something to...
Yeah,
we won't hold you to it.
I mentioned one. I would love if we could build the temple.
Yeah.
Love that. I would absolutely love if we could do that.
Yeah.
Mary, though, has come up with a kind of a really cool temple-esque idea, though, that I think is it's a really interesting one.
Well, we'll see if it happens. If it does, everyone will know.
She's not going to divulge.
Yeah. Mary will kill all of you in poker. We would all lose every round with Mary.
So there is one that has to do with travel and just moving people around. I've really, especially we'll have 4 open venues probably at the end of next year, 2019, and they're all going to be very different. I always thought about like tours, like moving around. Because like even in the warehouse, what I find myself doing is walking people around on little tours, or when I'm at the Walter Dome, taking people on little tours. It'd be kind of cool to take people on bigger tours, and maybe the tours are even outside of Walter sort of resources and out into other things. But it's just fun to get out, and a lot of people don't travel enough, you know, and then so, you know, who knows where you could go all over this planet, you know, and be part of that, you know, creating safe, immersive experiences that are out in the real world, and then those same sort of immersive experiences in a virtual world. You know, I'm really interested in augmenting reality, and you know, I think we're doing it now with very basic tools and things like that. And then the last one is going tiny. You know, we've gone big. And,
Can't you just do something normal sized?
No, because scale is such a powerful thing to understand. It is incredibly powerful. It's where the solution to most of the planet's problems are in scale. When we can figure out something at a small scale and be able to expand it, or we see something that's happening on a big scale and be able to turn it into a focused thing. I believe, I know none of that made any sense at all, but I see scale as the skill that, you know, can really do a lot of good.
Yeah, absolutely. Ryan, do you have any stuff you're working on for the Hive that you're excited about next?
No, I mean, I think just an expansion of like our programming. Like Mary said, we really only started doing programs in April, and you know, we're really happy with where we've ended up now, but just more of it. I hope that's not a boring answer.
No, do it again.
Yeah, okay, I'll do it again. So actually, we only started in April. No, I'm just kidding. No, the other thing that we have been talking a lot about with the Hive is like we're doing all these programs with targeted groups and community partners and stuff like that. But we really want this space to also be more open just generally to people that want to come in and build stuff. So like having more of like an open, doing more open hours, I guess, so that anybody can just come in and they don't have to be taking a workshop. They can just come in and work on a project here. So.
Right. Yeah, that's awesome. Man, it really incredible. I had an incredible time Saturday. Super grateful for all of you and everything you've done and will continue to do. And I'm excited about the future part 3 because the amount of stuff that you guys are doing. Maybe connect next year. There's going to be 5 more facilities in Arizona. It'll be like...
Thank you. It meant so much that you came and were at our event. And of course, the first rules show up, and you did. And you're very nice, and I haven't seen you leave a mess anywhere.
Thank you. Good, I've hidden it well. I hope nobody looks at it.
It really meant a lot that you came. Really
Thank you. Thank you, Gert. You guys are always perfect energy, and I mean, I've been thanking you multiple times in the intros for providing an amazing Burner Podcast party for us out on Playa, and again, it's been an amazing journey, and I'm looking forward to next year. So, you guys are awesome. Thank you again on behalf of everyone.
I know we'll see you soon.
Yeah, absolutely.
You are now listening to the sounds of Joe P. This set was recorded at Press Play, a Burner Podcast soiree. Joe was on the decks atop Calliope Art Car it is a Walter Art Car, just assaulting the front porch of Burners Without Borders camp with that thumping sound system. You may hear more music from that night on our sister show, Burner Podcast Presents Alkaline, or we may play some more sets on this show. Just stay tuned. This stuff is up also on Walter Productions SoundCloud pages. Make sure to look those up. You want to hear more from Joe P. himself? I don't blame you. He's dope. Find more of Joe P. at soundcloud.com/Joe-P. P is P-A-E. Joe-P. And you can like his Facebook page over at facebook.com/JoeP419. That's JoePEA 419. Also, be sure to follow Calliope's SoundCloud. That's at soundcloud.com/Calliope Stage. Calliope is Kalliope, and the word stage. Please give us a like on Facebook and join our Facebook group and leave us a review on iTunes. All these links are over at burnerpodcast.com. You can connect with me on all these social medias at Mr. Arash. That's MRARASH. I am traveling more for the show, as well as other creative projects and stuff that I'm doing. So let me know if you have an interest in, if you have interesting interview subjects in your neck of the woods that you think I should reach out to. We should have our team make some connections with and make a show happen. I might come your way, crash on your couch and eat all your food. #Burner Life. Burner Podcast is produced by Rebel Dharma, along with associate producers Lee Hemingway and Tori Massey. Our network music editors are Navjit Sarna and Louis Galipeau. New shows are generally up on the first and third Wednesdays of the month. The show is available on all the podcast platforms. Our opening theme music, America's Horse with No Name Remix, is produced by Joman. Find it over at soundcloud.com/DJ Joman. We love you, dear listeners, and until next time, love and light and all that other crap. Take us back to the playa, Joe P.
That's 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 Anthrax. Anthrax. Anthrax.
I'll take you up. I'll set you free. Open the gates. Fly with me. Let me show you something you ain't never seen. Free your head. Free your head. Trip to the red planet. Enjoy our space, odyssey.
burnerpodcast.com.